What's going on, guys? This is Gainz Gaming. We are live here with our very own Shappy Gaming. Shappy, say hi.
What is up, Gainz? How's it going, Gainz group?
It's been so weird not being in the same kingdom for how long has it been now? A couple months?
Oh my god. Yeah, it's been pretty bizarre. I definitely miss having you around, if only to bail me out in fights and give me res, but you know, it's also fun to commiserate occasionally.
And as I feel like it's mostly the resources that you miss. Me loading you up every KVK.
I mean, I'm notoriously a bad farmer for my farmer stats, so you know, we're not all great here.
Room for improvement. The first topic we're going to be covering in this video is Imperiums versus low seed. What is better to play in? Now, I am in an Imperium KVK or Imperium Kingdom of 1846, and Shappy is in an A seed kingdom. However, he has played in C seed kingdoms before, so we're going to get a little bit of knowledge from him on what it's like to play in that lower seed KVKs. So, Shappy, what are your initial thoughts, like Imperium versus low seed?
Oh man. So I've been playing Rise of Kingdoms since 2019, and I remember way back when, right, being an Imperium meant you were a badass, right? That was like the goal. That was what you aspired to. And it was less of a issue when you hit Imperium. Nowadays, when you hit Imperium, it's like, ah, crap, we got to get out of Imperium. But back then, it used to be like this badge of honor. You hit it and you're like, yes, we did it. That's changed a lot over time. And I started in 1304. 1304 did hit Imperium at one point, and then it started going downhill and downhill and downhill and downhill. And then it was like a low B seed right before I left. And then we went to 2120, and then we went to not 2489, but 2389, and that was a C seed. I'm now back in 3265, which is an A seed. And the combat is very, very, very different between all of the different tiers. So in Imperium KVKs, right, you end up with some really insane battles that can last a long time, or in some cases, not last a long time. Cough, cough, 2489. But in A seeds and below, you typically won't see that. Especially as you get down to like the B and the C seeds, your Kingsland battles could only be just a couple hours. And the advantage of being in those tiers is there's a lot fewer mega whales. If you're a mega whale, you get a ton more kills. But you also have to be online, right? If you're a mega whale with 300 million power and you're not online, you've totally screwed your kingdom. So those are just some of my early thoughts. I mean, Gainz, what's your experience been? You've been mostly in A seed and Imperium kingdoms. I know you've had some pretty wacky matchups over the years.
Yeah, and I feel like that's one thing that's gotten a lot better in recent months, I would say, is KVK matchmaking. Because before, when you were bloated in power in an A seed or an Imperium KVK, like the matchmaking was just awful. Either you had a decent matchup or you had a bunch of people that weren't even going to fight. And, you know, our time in 1079 being Imperium, we did struggle with that a couple of times. Where we were like the top dog and we were expected to carry the entire KVK. And then you're like, oh, I have no allies to help me out. And now it's like a 1v4. So I feel like matchmaking is definitely better. And kind of like what Shappy was saying, in my experience, I've mostly been in upper seed kingdoms. Now that I'm in 1846, we did just drop Imperium to get some more players in, but we are planning on hitting Imperium again going into our next KVK, which I'm sure we'll hit during the training stage, pre-KVK. I'm sure Makot will get us there by himself. But when we talk about, you know, higher seed KVKs, the fighting is completely different. Kind of like Shappy was saying, the field presence is just completely different in an upper seed KVK. I've covered a couple of lower seed KVKs, and you can get some pretty decent field fighting depending on the matchup. However, if you have like KVKs that have 5 different kingdoms in one camp, it's because they're all very low seed kingdoms and they don't have as many active players. versus higher Imperium KVKs, like the KVK that Plato is in, for example. He's in the chat right now in 1960. They have so many players on the field, and almost all of them are Mega Whales. Like, they are just going to slap everybody in the field, but the players that they're fighting are also just as strong and just as powerful. So I think, like Shappy was saying with the Mega Whales, if you are somebody who is 274 million power in an Imperium KVK, like if you're missing for a couple of hours, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're in a CC kingdom and you're this player and you're gone for a couple of hours, your kingdom is going to lose because they need that account in the field or garrisoning or rallying. Otherwise, they're going to be completely screwed over. And one interesting thing too is that I actually just migrated my alt account to a low seed kingdom. I migrated my alt account to 2324. Huge shout out to Flash Dash Clips in the chat right now. Hunter, he is one of the kings in 2324. And I will be fighting on my siege account here on my alt account in a CC KVK, which is kind of what made me want to do this live stream to Shappy, not only because he had experience in a CC KVK, but also because I will too on this account. Now, granted, it's an alt account, so it's a little bit different, but you know, it still will give me a little bit of that concept of what it's like to fight in a lower seed KVK where people aren't max tech, people aren't spending a ton of money, and the field presence is just a lot lower. Would you say that your experience was a lot less field fighting, Shappy?
When I was in a smaller kingdom, maybe. I think you more get skirmishes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't get these massive murder balls that you end up just clashing together, which, to be honest, I don't really care much about anyways. You get a lot more, you know, 1v1 or with 5 marches, or like 5v5 with 5 people. And to be honest, I actually kind of prefer those sometimes, because when you get in these big murder ball situations, A, you get terrible lag. But B, you oftentimes can't see what you're targeting or who you're targeting. And so you end up in this really monotonous battle scenario where you're in dot mode and you're just dragging your troops into the dot and you're dragging your troops back out of the dot. And it doesn't matter what troop type you attack. That's just how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think in the smaller KVKs, it's a little bit different. I also think, and we can talk about this in a bit, Lilith kind of killed Imperiums, right? It used to be you'd have 4 alliances in an Imperium, and that was huge. Nowadays, you hit 20 billion power, which is really 2 strong alliances in your Imperium, which sucks. I wish that weren't the case.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like I said, we're going to hit Imperium again, probably soon, and our alliance is 13.5 billion power. So when you think about that, that's insane to think about nowadays in 2025, where, you know, 13 billion power is almost Imperium, whereas like you said before, like 25 billion power was hitting Imperium. It's just completely different in terms of how much power is in every kingdom. And I feel like that's something that, like obviously Lilith was making it a lot harder to migrate accounts in, making it harder to fill up alliances essentially because you hit Imperium sooner. But I think another concept that has made this harder is just more kingdoms expanding the game. Like, we have way more kingdoms now than we did a year ago, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. And so I feel like that also just moves things around so that there's more players dispersed in more kingdoms, because like you think about it, the new kingdoms nowadays are like in the 3,000s, almost 4,000s. When I first started playing the game, it was in the 1800s. So it's just completely different with the amount of kingdoms that are coming in the game, which kind of segues us into our next topic. But first, I want to see if you have any closing remarks on the Imperium versus lower seed KVKs, Shappy.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're not a whale, right, and you're just buying pop-ups, you're really going to be better off in like a B or a low A seed kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a whole lot of benefit in being in an Imperium kingdom, because even if you get those gold chests, even if you get those speed ups, right, you're going to be using them and flipping them around right away to heal. And I'm also not condoning buying resources, but in these mega kingdoms, you have to have a lot of resources. So if you're not farming them, you're going to be in trouble.
I 100% agree. And I talked about this after my last KVK where we were fighting against 1960. And, you know, the amount of resources that I spent in that KVK for 1 billion kill points is just absurd. it was close to 30 billion total resources that I spent in that KVK, including almost 7 billion gold, which is, if I open everything I have right now, is almost 7 billion gold. I spent that on 1 billion kill points. Now, for reference, when I was in 1079, I spent a fraction of that amount of resources to get over 1 billion kill points. It was like 1.5 billion kill points, and it was probably half the amount of resources that I spent to get those kill points. And that's the difference between A seed and Imperium. Now, granted, like if you're an A seed kingdom, you could still match up against kingdoms like 1960, but it's much less likely. And you're most likely going to have a good ally that pairs with you to kind of take some of the brunt of that damage. But like Shappy was saying, you might get a lot of speed ups, a lot of VIP and gems from being in these higher KVKs, and Imperium KVKs, but you spend them. Like, you spend so many resources, you spend so many speed ups. And like Shappy said, if you're not gathering a crap ton of resources on farm accounts and just constantly sending out your farmers and making sure you're being very, very adamant about getting as many resources as possible, you're going to be screwed. And likewise, if you're not spending a ton of money, you're still going to be screwed because you just don't have the ability to fight as well in these Imperium KVKs because everyone is max tech, which just makes it so much harder to, actually be able to hit requirements, which is why so many people can't maintain being in an Imperium KVK. So I would say that if you are somebody who is not a high spender, you're somebody that just casually plays the game, maybe does pop-ups, maybe spends a little bit here and there, but you're not really like trying to be a garrison, trying to be a rally leader, like you're probably not going to be best fit in an Imperium kingdom. And that's just the reality of it. Like, everyone has their different spot, and you certainly can be a low spender, a free to play in an Imperium KVK, but it's going to be a lot harder, and you're not going to be able to have as much power as you want to because your requirements are just going to be a lot higher the higher amount of power you have. So for most players, Imperium is just out of reach unless you're somebody that is going to be spending, or somebody that's going to spend a ton of time having a ton of farm accounts, which for me, that's what I choose to do. Obviously, like Shappy said, some people do buy resources, but we're not condoning that here because that is against the terms and conditions. Personally, I like to grind for my resources. I feel some kind of reward from it. I don't know what you call that. Maybe it's just me being psychotic, but I actually enjoy farming all the resources and being able to send it to myself. It's just rewarding being able to show like, yeah, I earned all these resources. I did this all myself. And, like Shappy just said, he prefers to beg for his resources, which is why he misses having me in his kingdom so much. But I definitely think that if you're a casual player, Imperium probably isn't the best spot for you. And somewhere in between low seed and Imperium is going to be a good fit, whether that's C seed, B seed, or a low A seed like Shappy is in.